Bow to my great gurus, Paramhansa Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, Swami Kriyananda Ji, and I bow to the God that resides in all of you and in every particle of the universe. This is, at least to me, a fascinating subject that we're going to talk about: karma, destiny, and free will. It's all interrelated and magnificently designed. I was with Ananda Ma for just a few days, but it was one of the highlights of my life. And she told someone who asked a question about, basically about why the rulers of India and Pakistan couldn't more easily work together, and she was silent for a long time. And then after a few hours, her answer was, "Don't you think that he who designed this universe also knows how to run it?" And so it is with our lives. We think that we have a whole lot more control over our lives than we actually do. But we're going to delve into that topic tonight, and I hope interestingly so. Let's start with the question of karma. Karma means simply action, but even on a physical level, in the laws of physics, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And it is exactly that is the law of karma. For every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. But the reaction means that whatever we put out returns to us ineluctably. Now, the reason for this is that the entire universe, our life in this universe, our lives are basically a school. And we're born again and again, just as these young children have their classroom period ahead of them, their education ahead of them. They will return to their classrooms again and again and again in order to learn their lessons. Finally, they will graduate and be free from the necessity to go to school. Well, we are also in a school, and our graduation, our final exam, will be freedom from this ego. And I'll talk about ego. In fact, let me talk about it a little bit now, because it's completely tied in to the law of karma, action and reaction. The ego, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji defined the ego as the soul that is attached to or deluded for a period of time into thinking that it is the body and the personality that it is inhabiting at that particular life. And so, if you think of yourself as the ego, as being who you are, that means that you still haven't learned your lesson, because ultimately we came from God, and ultimately the destiny for every one of us is to merge back into God. But as long as we think that we're someone different from God, as long as we think that we're someone different from the others sitting in this room, if you think that you're different from the person sitting next to you in an essential way, then that means that the law of karma is going to continue to send you to school. And we will continue to be in that school for as long as it takes, but it's a much more interesting and in-depth lesson plan than what we get when we go to third form or fourth form and the teacher gives us a lesson plan. This karmic lesson plan means that every thought, every action that we have, every thought that we have, every emotion that we have, sends out a pulse of energy. And that pulse of energy goes out and then it returns to us. And that returning to us is the way that we learn. We learn how to be in tune with the laws of the universe. There was a beautiful poem by Paramhansa Yogananda ji that I was deeply affected by. It was, "Father, reveal thyself to me, that I may understand and obey the laws of this universe. Let thy will, not my will, be done in this life." So that prayer, if we were able to live on that plane, then we wouldn't need to go to school anymore. But as long as we're not living on the plane where we're completely in tune with the will of God, then whatever we send out, every thought, action, deed, emotion, sends out a pulse of energy, and that's going to return to us. So if we're unkind to someone, how are we going to learn that unkindness is not a valid way to live life? It doesn't seem that unkindness is necessarily punished in this lifetime, does it? You must have known many, many people who were unkind and yet have positions of authority, have positions of honor, and yet underneath treat people very poorly. So it doesn't seem that they've been punished by the world around them. But the law of karma says that if they are unkind, then ineluctably that energy is going to return to them in much the same form, but in the opposite direction. And so unkindness means that someone is going to be unkind to you, and you will feel what it feels like. You'll understand what happens to your life when someone is unkind to you. And it takes a long, long, long time, but gradually, by our own actions, our own behavior patterns, we become our own teachers. And so that law of karma is the way in which we're going to learn whatever we need to learn in order to become free souls. Now, there are two basic kinds of karma. One is the karma of this lifetime that is determined by our soul nature. Remember, Master, we refer to Paramhansa Yogananda ji as Master. So when you hear me say Master, that's who I mean. So Master said that the ego was the soul identified with the body. When the soul identifies with the body, it also gives a kind of a karmic pattern for that particular life. A karmic, one might say, purpose for the life. And so you may have come into this life to learn strength. You may have come in to learn love. You may have come in to learn kindness if you were unkind before. So you'll have a primary purpose to this life, and then many, many, many kind of sub-lessons to learn that relate to that. But the soul has determined that purpose to this life because it's the soul wanting to be free from the delusion of ego that is behind this soul evolutionary process. And so you have this basic karma that is determined by your soul, and then there's a second kind of karma. Remember, every thought, every word, every emotion, every action. Now, if you add up that over several millions of lifetimes, there is a whole lot of built-up karma. Think of it as old exams from your school days that weren't quite completed, or that you got a fail mark on those. And you have to come back and you have to clean up all of those. Now, those karmic patterns are not just random, but they begin to, let's call it, form clusters. So we begin to have karmic patterns that we have. And in this lifetime, we will have a karmic pattern that is not very much different from our last lifetime. Our body is going to look pretty much like it did last time. The skin might be different. But if we have a tendency toward being obese in a former lifetime, we will carry that tendency into this lifetime. If we have a tendency toward being athletic, we'll carry that into this lifetime. And so we carry the intelligence, perceptiveness, whether you're interested or not interested in spiritual ideals, what your desires and hopes are. All of those things we carry with us from lifetime to lifetime, and especially the relatively recent lifetimes we carry with us. But within us also is a kind of a memory matrix that has all of the memories of all of our past lives, all of our past accumulated actions. Paramhansa Yogananda ji said that when we die in this lifetime, we will go through a kind of a review, a life review. And so we're met by some spiritual energy, light, or it may take a form, and that life review will be given to us. And our conscious mind at that time will remember everything that we did during that lifetime. I met a man who had an experience of a near-death experience. He wrote a very famous book in America, but he had been a soldier in the army. And during his time in the army, he had had a particular job as a sniper. And as a sniper in the army, he had killed many people. And so when he had this near-death experience, he had that life review, and he said it was excruciatingly painful, because what happened is he remembered all of those actions, and so his conscious mind remembered it. But Master said the subconscious mind remembers not only the actions that you did, but the effects on everyone else. And so this man remembered, as he was going through this life review, for everyone he had killed, it was if he was that person, and he saw the ramifications, the children that were left behind, the widows that were left, the life cut short. And it was an excruciating experience, because he felt himself in the heart of that which had been determined by his mind to be other than himself. Then Master went on to say that the subconscious and superconscious minds remember not only your deeds, but the deeds of everyone on the planet, of everything going on during your lifetime. Now, in our normal functioning state, that's an amazing statement. It seems impossible. But that's our consciousness, because our consciousness ultimately, we are connected with God. And when the veil of separation blocks us, then we remember everything. I have an amusing story. When we have a son, and when he was about 5 or 6 years old, I don't remember the occasion, but we were talking about how God was a part of everything. And my little son said, "Do you mean that if a little ant on the other side of the world crawls into a hole in the ground, that God knows about that?" An interesting question. And so I said, yes, if he just thinks about it, then he knows about it. And my little son, 5 years old or 6 years old, paused and said, "Why would he have to think about it if he is that ant?" And I said, you're right, thank you. the wisdom of babes, he was correcting that erroneous thought. So at any rate, the point here being that this lesson plan that we have karmically determined for ourselves is into intricate details. And so everything that we need to learn is going to be brought to us. And it is predetermined really by ourselves that it's going to be brought to us. And that lesson plan is what we think of as the matrix of our life. Now, the question inevitably arises then is, if our karma determines what is going to take place in our life, how much of life is determined already? Well, a lot. In fact, virtually everything. Someone in a lecture asked Swami the question, how much of the karma is determined? And his answer was, down to the color of the shirt that you will wear on any given day. So, if the color of the shirt that we put on this morning, or before we came here, if that is already determined by our karma, it doesn't seem to leave us much free will, much choice in life. So how much of our life is determined by destiny? That's a very interesting and deep question. Daviji and I, last year when we were in Bangalore, we had what is called a Nadi reading. And Nadi, there's a series of readings from ancient times. There's a book of Bhrigu, there's a Nadi lineage. At any rate, these are readings that come from a time far back, perhaps several thousand years ago, but they're written now on little papyrus leaves or palm leaves. And occasionally, if you find a Nadi reader and go, you may find a reading that pertains to you. And so we went, and the reader knew nothing of us at all, except our name and our birthday. And so after asking a few questions about, is your mother alive or dead, is your father still living or not, he went to another room and he searched, and then he came back with a little leaf about that long and about that wide. And it was written on, folded up, so there were several, one could call them pages to that. And then he began to read. So these leaves were at least several hundred years old. And it was written in Sanskrit. And it was as if he was reading and then interpreting what was written there. And he began to tell us about our family. He began to tell us that we had one child, that I had two brothers who were still living, and one sister that had passed away, that we have one child, that we have 3 grandchildren. He told us about our health. He told me that I have low blood pressure, which I do. He told Devi that she eats her food too quickly, which she has a tendency to do. So in minute detail, he, as if was reading things in our life. So the things that he said that were verifiable to us, that were correct, made us more confident in what he said about things that we couldn't verify so easily. But he said that the purpose of my life, remember we were saying that the soul, the Purusha, determines a purpose for each life. The purpose of my life is Guru Seva. And that's why I was born, was to serve my Guru. And so it's not only our reading, but someone having heard that we had a Nadi reading, told me that Deepak Chopra also had a Nadi reading. And so I looked it up, and he was telling about his Nadi reading. It was fascinating because when he had his reading, they gave the exact time of his birth, they gave his name, his parents' name, his name of his wife, of his children, of his brothers and sisters. But when they gave his mother's name, which was Pushpa, they gave another name, and then said that due to a relative's insistence, it was changed. And this kind of disturbed him, but he wanted to check it out. He said he stopped the reading in the middle of it and went and called his mother. And his mother told him that yes, indeed, she had had another name, birth name, but when she was 3 years old, because the name had a similar sound, it rhymed with the word for sad, an uncle insisted that she change her name, and so at age 3, it was changed to Pushpa instead of the name that she had been born with. Now, if someone several hundred years ago could write out that detail in Sanskrit on a papyrus leaf, it begs the question then, how much of this life is determined? How does somebody do that? We think that we're born, at least I, when I was growing up, thought that I was born, and it was kind of a random act, DNA wheel of fortune or something, where something spins around and I happen to be born into a certain family with a certain DNA. That's the way at least I grew up in the West, thinking that everything was kind of randomized. But it can't be randomized. If someone is writing out on leaves that are several hundred years old that your mother had her name changed at age 3. And so that says to me that we're working in a kind of a matrix of our life that is much, much more determined than what we actually would think that it would be. Swami Kriyananda asked Ananda Moy Ma about karma and its effect and how much free will we have. And her answer to Swamiji was that our life is determined for us. It is as if we're on a train, and that train is running on a track, and that track has its destination and its timing and its schedule. We have the free will to walk to the head of the train or walk to the back of the train. That's how much free will we have. Now, but the great saints always emphasize, none of the great saints that I've ever read, certainly no one in our lineage, has said, well, everything is determined, therefore, why don't you just kind of relax, kick back, and let the universe take care of it all. And it'll carry you to your enlightenment. That's never the teachings of these great ones. They are always teaching us to put out energy, especially spiritual energy. And so Master said that basically we have the choice to think of God or to not think of God. That's the free choice we have. Now, when I heard that lecture with Swamiji, saying that even the tie or the shirt that you put on any given day is already determined for you, I had the thought, that isn't fair. I don't know if any of you have that kind of thought, that it isn't fair that we don't have any choice at all. I don't know, maybe it's an American thing, but maybe it's not. Who feels that may not be the fairest way to have something? Yeah, quite a number of hands are going up. And that was certainly my reaction. But let me, as I've thought about this conundrum over the years, it has seemed fairer and fairer. Because the question, how much free will do I have, is entirely determined upon your definition of I. When you say, how much free will do I have, and if someone says you don't even have the choice of the color of your shirt, it seems unfair, but only if your definition of who I am is wrong. And in fact, there are some spiritual paths that the essence of the path is to ask that question, who am I? And keep shredding and shredding the layers until you get down to the layer of who I really am. Master told this story. First of all, remember, he defined the ego as a soul when it's in a state of identification with the body and with the personality. So he told this story. There were 3 Rajas, and they heard that if one truly knew who he was, he would be the ruler of the universe. And so each of them thought, well, if I know who I am, then I'm going to be able to easily conquer these other 2 characters. So I better find out who I am. So all 3 of them traveled to a guru in order to learn who they were. And the guru said, well, I will indeed help you understand this. But first, you must go into the forest and meditate for 7 years, and then come back and tell me, who do you think you are? And so they went into the forest, and they meditated for 7 years, and then they came back. But one of them on the way back looked in a pond, saw his reflection, and thought, well, that sort of looks like me, but not like I was when I came, so I'd better clean up. And so he washed and he oiled his hair, and he cut his beard, and he trimmed and waxed his mustache, and looked again, and he was rather proud because the austerity had taken care of the problem he was having with a little paunch. And so he was quite proud of his appearance, and he came back and said to the guru, well, I know who I am. I'm the kingly Raja. I don't know what he said his name was, but I've looked in the mirror, and I can see who I am now. And the guru said, very good. You may go back to your kingdom. The other 2 said, now, wait a minute, there's something a little wrong with this. I may look much like I did when I came here, but I've changed. And if I've changed, certainly just my appearance, just my body, that can't be who I am. And in fact, modern science says that today, whoever you are sitting there physically, not a single cell in your body was there 7 years ago. And so, if you aren't the cells of your body, how can you be your body? Maybe you're some sort of a holding pattern, a DNA pattern, or an RNA pattern, or something of this sort. But you're certainly not the physical body. But this first Raja went off thinking that's who he was. But the other 2 said, there's something wrong with this. And the guru said, very good, very good. You've understood. Now go off in the forest and meditate for another 7 years. And so after another 7 years, they came back, and the second one said, well, you know, there's some essence that is here that even though my body has changed, even though I've grown and I've matured and all of that has happened, yet there's some essence here. I know that I'm the same person that I was when I was born and when I was growing up. And yes, I've learned some lessons, but somehow there is a continuity there that I know that I am who I was. And so the Guru said, well, you've understood that your personality continues from birth through life. And this Raja says, yes, I can see that that's not the body, but my personality. That's who I am. And the Guru said, very good, go back to your kingdom. And the third one said, well, there's something wrong with this teaching too, because even though I have a continuity of this personality, I know that I'm something more than that. And so the Guru said, go back to the forest and meditate another 7 years. Now, he was a rather stern teacher, sending them back all the time. But this time, the third one meditated, and during that meditation, he realized himself. He went beyond the body, beyond the personality, realized himself as the soul, and the soul as a spark of God, and he realized his oneness with everything. And then indeed he was the ruler of the universe, but had no interest in going back and ruling the little kingdom that he had identified. So let's come back to this question. If we're not the body and not the personality, who indeed are we? And why does it seem unfair if something other than ourselves determines who we are and what we're going to do? Last night I had an interesting dream. I dreamt that I was with Swami Kriyananda, and we had been at some function. It wasn't clear whether it was a dinner, whether it was some satsang, or even a talk like this. At any rate, in the dream, we were leaving a building and going to a car. And Swami Kriyanandaji, in his later years, his body was quite feeble, and our car was rather a jeep kind of a vehicle that was hard to step up into that vehicle. But Swami was full of vigor and full of energy, and he easily climbed up, and we drove home. Now, I won't go on to the rest of the dream. It is not material here. But what is interesting is that in that dream, there was a sense of that I was in the dream. There was an I that was with Swami Kriyananda, and Daviji was there, and a few other people. But isn't it interesting that in our dreams, we have a sense of ego, a sense of I-ness. There is one character in the dream that represents I, and the rest of the characters not I. So, what if that character in the dream last night was dressed in a certain way? What if that character began to complain that it's not fair that he didn't have a choice over what kind of clothes he had on? See what I'm saying here? So if the character in the dream doesn't have a choice over the clothes that he's wearing, and he's complaining about it, who is he complaining about it to? He's complaining about it to me as the dreamer. Well, the same exact thing is happening here, is that we, the ego, are complaining that we don't have a choice about the color of the shirt we put on. But who are we complaining to? We're complaining to our own soul, who is determining these things. Master, in fact, said that the reason that we dream at night, spiritually, is because our nightly dreams give us the spiritual matrix of how he creates this universe. And so, the way out of this conundrum is, if there's a certain kind of dreaming called lucid dreaming, where you're dreaming and yet you're aware that you're dreaming. I've had lucid dreams, and in that dream, you can keep the play of the dream going, but you have some direction over it. So if you're in a lucid dream, indeed you could change the color of your shirt. And so, in this analogy, our job in this life is to become lucid dreamers. So in this life, instead of calling it a dream, let's call it a life. We need to become lucid livers so that we become aware that we're a character in something going on that is beyond what it appears on the surface. And that which is going on is a divine show, a divine plan. Master called this life very similar to a movie. And if we're a lucid liver, then we can bend the rules of this dream life and we can have more self-determination. So how much free will, how much determination we have? The ego has very, very little, but the soul has a great deal. Now I'll end with this story, because even when we're in the soul consciousness, there, as a separate entity, we don't have a whole lot of free will, one might say, because we identify with God and we want only to do the will of God. And so when Master came back to India in 1936, his only return visit, there was a relative that he raised from the dead. And someone, when he went back, he told a disciple in America, he told them that that was what he had done. The disciple in America said, "But did you do that of your own free will, being a relative, or because God told you to?" And Master replied as if, what a silly question. Because God told me to. Because in that state, there is no difference between the entity that seems to be a spark of God and God Himself. In realization, then we are doing the will of God, and it is God alone who has free will. So the ego doesn't have free will. You, as God, have complete free will. So the purpose of this life, once again, the ultimate purpose of all lives, is to realize that who and what we are, that we are indeed God.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's a joy to share our Guru's teachings with you. And I want to especially thank the members of the Ananda Sangha in Pune City and in our community for all the loving service that they put into creating this beautiful event for us to come together and speak of God's teachings and share God's presence. As Jyotish has been speaking, this question of free will, destiny, karma, is one that people from time immemorial have asked. Why are we bound in this world? And our line of gurus have come. Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswarji, and our beloved Guru Deva. They have come with a new expression of ancient teachings. Someone asked our Guru Master, "Is this a new religion?" He said, "Oh no, it is a new expression." And so what I would like to share with you now, perhaps a bit more practical, is how we can ameliorate or even remove our karma according to the teachings of our gurus who have come in this age of energy to show us that we can apply energy in practical ways to get rid of karma and for our own spiritual growth. This is not a time for spiritual passivity. It is a time of spiritual dynamic effort. And if I could give one overview of the teachings of our line of gurus, it's simply that. They gave us dynamic, practical things to do to find God. We were sharing at a satsang yesterday. Master said, speaking of his teachings, the time for knowing God has come. And that's not just a nice saying. He meant we have brought teachings and techniques and understanding that will break through the bondage of karma, of understanding, of egoic awareness and materialistic consciousness, so that the masses of people who are interested in these teachings, and that's not everyone, of course, we know that, but Master said, all those who come to me, no one goes home empty-handed. And so this is a wonderful, wonderful teaching. And now I would like to share with you some points of how our gurus taught us we can burn through our karma, we can overcome karma. The first is by using willpower. It says in Autobiography of a Yogi that karma is simply what we have done in the past, or thought, or felt. But what we have done, we can undo. And that's the important thing. By putting out the energy to counter the wrong actions that we have put into motion in the past. So remember that. We have created our karma, and we can uncreate our karma by wise application of spiritual principles. And so by putting out the willpower, we can understand, however much energy went into a certain act, we need to put out more energy to counter that. Swami Kriyananda has given the visual example of like a graph. And let's say there is a line going this way, which represents our past bad karma. If we want to stop that movement, that momentum, we need to put out more and opposite energy to counter it. And sometimes people get discouraged and they say, oh, I don't know how much karma I have. How much can I understand what to do to put out so much energy? Well, think of karma as like a big nail driven into a board, and you're trying to pull out that nail. You don't know how much is driven into that board, but we pull and we pull. And even if you think maybe it's very deep, I will keep pulling till I pull it out at its roots. And so it is with our own karma. There was a woman disciple at a renunciate at Master's Ashram in Mount Washington, California, and she was plagued by the bad karma of being pulled out into the world, pulling back to a worldly, materialistic life. And finally, she fought it for years. One day, she let her energy down, and that karma took over, and she left the spiritual life. And Master said, and this is a lesson to all of us, he said, if she would have stayed one more day in the ashram, she would have worked out the karma of lifetimes. Now it will be many more lifetimes before she is free of it. So using our willpower, using that ability to say, I will keep trying, no matter how hard this seems, no matter how hard the difficulties, never give up. Master said every test that we find in life is a test of our willpower. That's important to remember that. And there's a wonderful chapter that I highly recommend. How many of you, please raise your hands, have read Autobiography of a Yogi? Just to see. Many of you. If you haven't read it, it will be the turning point in your life, truly. So please read it. But there's a wonderful chapter in it, very pertinent to our topic today, called Outwitting the Stars. And in that, an astrologer draws up Master's chart, his astrological chart, and in it says that he will be married 3 times, being twice a widower. And Master, who knew that his life was meant to be serving God, knew that he was not supposed to be a householder, said, this will not be. And he took that chart and he burnt it up and he put the ashes in a bag by his older brother's door. And he said, the seeds of past bad karma will not germinate when roasted in the fire of wisdom. And so he was determined that that would not happen in his life, and he knew that he had a divine mission, and so it was. Also in that chart, he said, I looked at my chart, and I looked at the periods in my life that I had the most adverse astrological influences, where it said everything would go wrong, nothing would happen. And he said, I determined that even in those worst periods, I would accomplish what I set my mind to do. He said it took extra willpower, and I succeeded. And so to overcome karma, we need to put out willpower. The second important thing in overcoming our karma is to practice meditation. And this has a twofold benefit. The first, the seeds of our past bad karma actually reside in our astral body, in our subtle body, in our astral spine, and they can figure around the chakras according to what that karma is. And with the practice of meditation, and most especially with the practice of Kriya Yoga, which we teach the preliminary techniques here at our Pune City Center, also at our retreat. With the practice of Kriya Yoga, you are consciously taught how to raise the subtle energy which dislodges these seeds of past bad karma, the vrittis, and brings them up to the centers of higher awareness where they are burnt, just as Master said, burnt in the fire of wisdom. And the more you practice meditation, the more you find yourself. It isn't just, oh, I feel peaceful. You know, you see all these pictures of these beautiful young girls in yoga outfits meditating. It isn't just to have a very beautiful exterior demeanor. It's to burn up your past bad karma, to find freedom in God. And so, by practicing meditation, we find that those things that had such a hold on us, and I have found this in my life, things that I thought, oh, I'll never be able to get rid of that wrong attitude, and you work on it outwardly, and you work on it, but through the practice of meditation, you dry up that stream at its source so that it no longer flows in your consciousness. But there's another aspect of meditation that's important too in helping us to be free of karma. Master teaches us that the ego is actually an aspect of the astral body. And it is the ego that is the post that the rope of our karma is tied to. And so through the practice of meditation, that awareness of ourself, as Jyotish was describing, as a separate ego, it begins to expand. Just as in the story of the three Rajas, we begin to realize, I'm so much more than this body. I'm so much more than this personality. I'm so much more than this ego. And when we begin to dissolve the very roots of ego, the karmic rope has nothing to adhere to, and that karma does not come to us so strongly. There's a very interesting story that we read recently, took place in the life of one of our gurus, Lahiri Mahashaya. And in this story, Lahiri had 5 children, and one of his daughters was critically ill. And Lahiri's wife came and said, isn't there anything we can do to help our daughter? By this time, she was a grown woman, married, and living in the household of her husband. And Lahiri said, yes, there's something we can do to save her. Grind up, he told his wife, a specific nut and 3 peppercorns. Grind it into a powder and give it in some water and drink it, and she will be fine. And so the wife did this. Then she went to the home of her daughter, but the in-laws were not at all open to this treatment. They were working only with Western doctors, and so they weren't open to this, and she didn't want to intrude, so she didn't give her daughter this drink. And her daughter died. Lahiri's daughter and her daughter died. And that evening, Lahiri would give us a discourse, a satsang, in his home every night. And the disciples started coming and they said, "Oh, Master, certainly on this terrible night in your life, you don't want to give a discourse." He said, No, it's fine. Let's carry on. And he began expounding the truths of the, spiritual philosophy and practices. And then the disciples said, "But Master, we are so distraught. We can't focus our minds on what you're saying." He said, "In that case, we won't have a satsang this evening." But then one of them said, "Aren't you upset by what has happened?" And he said, "Let me explain it to you this way. If you take a slab of marble and put it on top of another marble slab, if you strike a big blow on that marble, the second slab, it will leave no impression. But if you take that slab of marble and put it on wet sand, and then you strike a blow, it will leave a deep impression." And he said, this is what your minds are like. They are like the wet sand. And so this karmic blow is leaving an impression in your mind. He said, "I have received a much deeper blow than any of you, but I have trained my mind through the dissolution of the ego not to leave an impression." And so it is with karma. The more we identify ourselves with spirit, not with our ego, the less impression our karmic patterns have on us. And they can come, they can go. Swami Kriyananda he went through many physical problems. We believe he was working out the karma of many people. But he would have a surgery. When he would leave the hospital as soon as possible, he would walk out cheerful, joyful. It was as though nothing had happened. And we saw this time and again with him, because there wasn't a post of ego to tie the rope of karma to. So another way we can get rid of our karma is through the intercession of the Guru and attunement with the Guru. The Guru is God's instrument. He knows, or she knows, exactly what karmic patterns we need to find freedom. Some of them the Guru will take away or ameliorate. Some of them he will let us go through because we need that experience. But once we have a true Guru, we can rest assured that our karmic knots are being untied. Once, many years ago, we were all coming up to Swami Kriyananda Ji. For those of you who don't know, he passed away in 2013. And he was one of the great lights in the world, and all of us in Ananda Sangha now are doing our best to carry on the great work he started. So we all were coming up to Swamiji for a blessing. And afterwards he said, "I had a very unusual experience as each of you came up to be blessed. As I touched you and blessed you, I felt the unique pathway each of you would walk to work out your karma." And that's what the Guru can see. He can see the karmic intricacies and help us, like a labyrinth, help us move through them and take on big loads of our karma and our family's karma. I have seen this in many people. And so the true Guru, and certainly with Ma too, Ananda, my Ma, so many wonderful stories of how she protected her disciples, took their karma, freed them from great suffering. And it's also the attunement with the Guru, because if we align ourselves with a soul that is in freedom, we get a little bit of taste of that ourselves. There's the wonderful story from the Christian Bible of after the crucifixion, Christ appeared to some of the disciples as they were out fishing in their boats in the ocean. And there he was standing on the water, and he reached out his hand to Peter and some of the others, and he said, "Come to me." And they knew they had to walk across the water to come to him. But looking only at their guru, they stepped out of the boat, and they too walked across the water. This is the attunement with the guru. We can walk across the ocean of delusion by just focusing on the guru, saying, whatever storms I have to walk through, I don't care. I will walk through them if I keep my eyes only on the guru. And then finally, and probably the most important to work out our karma, is surrender to God, love for God, because it is God's grace that draws all of us towards freedom. As Jyotish was saying earlier, we have one choice ultimately, our Guruji said, to think of God or not to think about God. But it sounds so simple. But to think of God means that we tune in to something deeper than the law of karma. Swami Kriyananda has written a beautiful book, and I'll close with this thought, and then if you all have questions, please think of them. In a beautiful book based on his guru, our guru's commentaries on the beautiful mystical poem, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And Kriyanandaji took his guru's teachings and wrote a beautiful book. And in this book, it's speaking of karma. And it says, in karma's realm, karma rules supreme. But human beings have the ability to enter another realm altogether if they attune themselves to the divine wisdom behind the law of karma. The divine wisdom behind the law of karma. And then this freedom is eternally ours to accept God and his guidance from within, or to be guided by egoic desires. If we are guided by egoic desires, we are bound to the wheel of karma. There is no free will. Our destiny is predetermined. But if we tune in to the divine wisdom, God's presence behind the law of karma, then we begin walking the path to freedom. And this is the destiny of each soul. If you say, what is my destiny? Ultimately, your destiny, my destiny, is to find lasting freedom and bliss in God.
Is it right to say today, we can escape the law of land, but we cannot escape the law of karma? Is it right to say today?
Well, we can escape the law of karma not within, as David G. was just saying, not within the realm of karma, but we can escape by going beyond it. But when we talk about escaping karma, there are subtleties here. So let's say that it's our karma to receive unkindness back toward us. And that's to teach us in order to become kind. The law of karma says that that energy is coming toward us. Now, if we're moving in the direction that we sent out of unkindness, we're going to double the impact of that karma. But if we're moving in the other direction, then that karma is going to come up and not hit us such a heavy blow. In other words, as we learn our lessons, the karma that we're going to attract will have less influence on us. So we can't escape karma, but we can do some things that ameliorate the impact that it has. Also, another is, as we've said, the protection of the guru, the protection of higher consciousness, is like we can't escape the fact that it's raining outside, but we can go out and carry an umbrella. And so that umbrella will protect us, but it won't change the fact that that rain is coming.
Thank you.
A very good evening to all of you, and of course the chief guest and the speakers. Thanks a lot for the inspiring speech. Well, this is on behalf of my sister Nisha Madhyani, who isn't here. She particularly asked me to ask this question. I'll ask this question in the form of an illustration. Way back in the year 2006, she had borrowed some money. The amount, I would say, is 3.3 lakhs. That is 3.3. From a family whom she wished to get married to. That is the son of the family. Nonetheless, they did not get married because of the religion. 7 years down the line, that is the year 2014, she suddenly felt like returning the money back. So she just wants to ask, she returned it yesterday itself. She just wants to ask, was it a part of the karma of the past or of the present life? And what kind of karma was this? Because the boy's family gave the money to her unwillingly and she wanted it, so she took it. And she took it because she felt she had to educate herself further and the marriage wasn't happening and she was by herself. Because in short, we are orphans. Thank you.
Now we'll both have a go at this, but you can start.
Well, it's a complicated question, and it's, not knowing the people, it's hard to really give a definitive answer. But certainly to receive something that was given that is no longer given for a purpose that is no longer valid, then we need to return that. Otherwise, we'll have to pay it back some other time. And that's also a very good guideline for each of us. We've been talking about how to ameliorate past bad karma, but it doesn't help if we keep doing things that build up bad karma in this life. So every action that we take, if we want to find freedom, we need to say, well, by acting in this way or not acting in this way, am I leaving a debt? We were speaking with a very dear friend a few weeks ago, wonderful man we've known for many years in India, and he said he went to his guru, Narayan Swami, in Delhi some years ago, and he kept asking him the question, what is the purpose of human life? What is the purpose of human life? He wouldn't tell him for quite a long time, and then finally one day he appeared at their family home and he said, I'm here to answer Indu's question. And he said, the purpose of human life is to balance all accounts. And so I think that answers the question.
I'll add a little. This isn't in direct response to the question, but it's an interesting aspect of it that is brought up now. How much better to finish that karma off in this life when the memory of what it is still present in the conscious mind. Because had she not finished it off in this life, it would have carried on into succeeding lives, but she may never have understood because it would have been covered over with the mists of time. Why this family was acting in an odd way, why they were trying to steal from her, for instance, when all they were wanting was to get back their 26 lakh or whatever the amount was. But so when we have something that we feel our conscience tells us, let's balance that out. Don't pass it off. Act on that and try to finish off everything as quickly as possible. You know, there's a statement by Jesus in the Christian Bible that says, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. And many people have misinterpreted that, thinking that it means to be meek and never to act back, never to stand up for yourself, kind of, yes, if they kick you around, then let them kick you. It's not a statement of weakness, it's a statement of ultimate strength, that if your karma is bringing you a slap on one cheek, say, let's get rid of this at this point. I'm going to get all of my karma right now. And so acting on a sense of consciousness when your own conscience prompts you to do some dharmic action, that is a very, very great blessing. So don't pass that up. Act immediately on it. Your aunt did the right thing.
Just one little short thing. Unfortunately, due to lack of time, I'm going to have to limit the question and answers to this last question.
Hello. It's a really great honor to see you. Actually, only seen you on the videos of TV. So basically, my question is a bit off topic from here. But I remember I had gone for a rafting expedition, and when we came near the rapid of the river, I remember the boat was moving in a specific vibrations, and the moment of that going towards the rapid, then you go in it and all. And the moment our boat reached that specific rapid, I realized that I had been in the exact same place, but I had seen this all in a dream. So the question is, does God gives us small glimpses that in some near few times this is going to happen or something like that? So what will be the small explanation for this?
Well, we do get glimpses from time to time of something, and it's as if a little window opens for us, and that's a very great grace to have that little bit of window opening. And so our job always is to try to attune our will to the will of God. And if we can see that will a little bit more clearly, then that's a great blessing. Perhaps you too.
You know, this life really is a dream. And very often when you have a little glimpse of that, you get behind the getting so engrossed in the dream, and you realize it's all a show. Our Guruji would often take his disciples in America to go to the movies, not because he wanted to see the movie, but in the middle of the show, he would tap them on the shoulder and point up at the beam of light coming from the projector booth. And he would say, it's all a play of light and shadows, never forget that. And so all the incidents in our life are really just a play of life and light and shadow. And they come, they go. Don't identify with them, but keep your sights on God and Guru and our infinite beloved.
Thank you so much. Without wasting much of your time, thank you Jyotish Ji and Devi Ji. It was really, I consider myself fortunate to be here. Just a little thing. You said that we have to leave the post of ego for leaving the bondage of karma, for freeing ourselves from the rope of karma. For untying the karma, we need to leave the post of ego. What we need to stick to, which post we need to stick to for doing the good karma. You talked about leaving the bad karma and freeing ourselves. What about sticking to some post for doing the good karma, for that will, for that right energy and the positivity? What should we stick to? If not ego, what should we stick to?
Okay, if not ego, what should we stick to? The short answer is the will of God. The will of God wants always to do good, and He wants the greatest good for the greatest number, because He is that number of people. So if we leave the post of ego and the post of self-identification and self-will, what we cling to is the will of God. And when we cling to the will of God, not only does our life go beautifully, but we become a blessing for the world. these great ones are more of a blessing to the world than we can possibly imagine, and they do more good for everyone. So the will of God is what we should cling to.
One last thing. Thank you so much. But sticking just to, I agree, sticking to the will of the God, but I still didn't get it clearly. Like, if bad karma has to be untied, if I have to do the good karma, of course, the good, will of the God, but there is something which we strongly send it through our emotions and the actions and the feelings to the universe.
Okay.
That time, what should we?
Okay,
Yes.
I think I can answer that, and then sure Joe will be happy. There's a beautiful saying, chains though of gold still bind. So we don't even want to be attached to our good karma. Nishkam karma, do good in the world, but don't hold it to yourself. Just feel, there was a beautiful story of an Indian saint who found God, and who had so much devotion to God, and God granted him a boon and said, I'll grant you anything. And he said, let me wander through the countryside, and that wherever my shadow falls, may that person be healed or blessed or be taken out of poverty. But me, I never know. And so good karma, we don't want it to be attached either way. We want to identify with God within. And as you practice meditation, you begin to feel that greater self within you. And that's who we want to identify.